like a little short talk. I didn't think I was going to be doing more little talks, but I just want to talk about this whole concept about how you can only rely on yourself. This is the most true thing in the entire world. So anyway, like I love doing like collaborations. Like there are a few people I feel like that are consistent that you can rely on. Like Aya, she's really good. Like she's really balanced and really consistent. Not a lot of people can do that. A lot of people just don't have balance and consistency. Um, but I feel like in general, when it comes to things, and just some of my friends also are consistent. But I think in general, there's just a lot of people like they're not. You can't really rely on a lot of things. Like if you want to do something, you have to like do it from within. Happiness, tranquility, peacefulness, spirituality, everything comes from within. A group of people or organization, friendships, none of this can give you that. Um, accomplishing any goal, you have to do it from within yourself. So you always have to rely on yourself for everything and anything worth having. Happiness. You can't have happiness with anybody else, because if your happiness is contingent upon like a person, you'll never be a happy person. The happiest people are happy from within. They smile because they know from within themselves they find positivity. They don't need anybody else. The most spiritual, balanced, like kind-hearted people, they don't need a group of people to find that spirituality. They find it themselves. Like when Muhammad climbed the mountain, when Moses climbed the mountain, did he need a group of people to go with him? They went on their own. Like everybody, when they do something spiritual, religious, artistic, intellectual, like the true trailblazers, everything's done from within themselves. They don't need another person to do it. They just don't. So if you want something, like I don't claim to know spirituality. Like I honestly think a lot of it's bunky. I think a lot of people pretend to be spiritual when they're just not okay within themselves and they can't find balance within themselves. Like they're always looking for somebody to validate. But if you're okay from within, you don't need a political organization. You don't need to be an activist. You don't need like a spiritual group to reflect that back to you. Like I'm not trying to get down on religion or politics, but I think a lot of it is just for people that are afraid to like do something bigger and better within themselves. Because if you're very balanced within yourself, you don't always need to look to other people. So I'm thinking like this might seem like what does this have to do with YouTube? And I was when I did the talk with Aya tonight, like I used to think like 10 years ago that I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write a fiction book. I don't even like fiction books in general anymore because I mean, I used to read a lot of fiction that I really liked, but I kind of got bored with the genre just because there are some good fiction books, but a lot of fiction I read just didn't hit the spot. And I love nonfiction. I love history. I love memoirs. I love truth, like true things. Like I just love true stories. Like a lot of fiction just is so exaggerated that I didn't want to always be reading about somebody's fictional world. I just want to learn actual information or read a biography or a memoir. And that's actually a lot better than the fiction books I've been reading. So there are good fiction books I read. I've read a lot of really good fiction books in my day, but the reason I didn't see myself as ever being an author is because I wrote like this little story. It was like a romance novel thing. It's not even something I could relate to now. Like that was 10, almost more than 10 years ago when I finished writing it. I just at that time I had a different mindset. It wasn't like a typical romance novel. It was more about like being a single independent kind of person because I've always been a little too independent. Like independent people just do things their own way. Like they don't need other people. We just don't. Like that's just the kind of people we are. Um, we're not in need of other people. So when I wrote this like little romance novel thing, it was more just from the independent perspective of a woman that met a man that it didn't really work out at first, but they both somehow mirrored each other. But the story was just too tranquil. My sister read it. She goes, there wasn't like really any tension or anything that was really that great. And it was just like they were in Hawaii and they were on the beach a lot. And it didn't really entertain me that much. And I just kind of I didn't see myself as continuing writing stories like that. I just thought it sounded fun to be an author. But I think I love to read books. But the type of books I like to read has gravitated to, because I used to read like some romancy type stories. But like, look, I still say that Jennifer Weiner novels are very entertaining. And a lot of the novels, and Lisa C., like there's a lot of novels that I found very entertaining, but I'm just past that genre in my life. Like I've just read enough fiction. Like right now I'm reading a memoir that's really interesting. I read Prince Harry's Spare. That was kind of weird and trippy. And yeah, I guess he said he was on drugs part of the time. That was just, ugh. But I'm reading this book, Illegally Yours, and that is so good. Oh my God. Raphael, like, I guess he wrote for Jane the Virgin. He's a very good writer. And I didn't grow up like in his community, but he's around my age. And there's just something about references, like he references the LA riots. And one thing that really like disturbs me though is that his teachers didn't talk about like race inequality during the LA riots. I'm like the elephant in the room, they didn't address that. Like I think that was pretty blatant. Like these police officers beat up Rodney King. There was a problem like at that time. I'm not saying it's completely gone away, but it was a problem. And I'm not justifying what like looting businesses. I don't think that was the answer, but I do think holding those cops accountable that beat Rodney King is like they should have been like they beat him up, and it was very disturbing and it was not right, and it's not the first time it's ever happened either. But he addresses that and he addresses some other things in his book. But the part that's just so interesting is that his parents were doctors and they come to America, and he's Ecuadorian and he has to learn how to speak English. Like I think, what was it? He came in 1988. And I just remember being a kid in 1988. So I had a lot of like, there were just a lot of things in the book that were very nostalgic, even though I didn't live in his exact background, but just time references, time points. So I'm really enjoying that book. So I do like memoirs from time to time. I love to read history. I love biographies. I just am not a big fiction fan. So I used to think, oh, I want to write a fiction novel. But after I kind of did it, I wouldn't say that I did it real wholeheartedly. Like I was writing on it here and there, but I wasn't like writing on it with gusto. It wasn't like my pet project. It wasn't something that I was like tied to so deeply. But I don't know. It was just a weird premise. It was like the single woman's romance novel. I just don't. What? I don't. Okay, so it came from the premise that a lot of us are much older. Like when we did date people, and we're more independent people and we never really settled down. And in the story though, I feel like it was kind of cliche, and somebody kind of critiqued, like I shared a little bit of the novel like 10 years ago on Hub Pages actually, where we were talking about, and somebody critiqued it. They said, but wait, it's a cliche. Like the couple ends up together in the end. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of a cliche. It kind of is. And I think actually maybe like getting back to the novel thing, I think writing a book like that, what it kind of taught me is like, what if you could be independent, single for the rest of your life? Like a lot of us are. A lot of people in this world are not getting married. And it's not that we didn't want to. It's just like, I don't know, like honestly, like I have met people, but like even recently when I met somebody, like I kind of ranted about that the other day. I just, it wasn't that there couldn't be something. It's like I had to be okay with like what they, like some sort of weird compromise that they wanted. And that didn't make any sense. And I was like, no, I'm not even interested. So for me, I feel like it's unorthodox at that time, but there have always been people that are just single or just autonomous. and they just do everything on their own. And I think that's the quintessential, like, oh, you always have to rely on yourself. That's part of it. You could be in a relationship. There are people in a relationship though too that are married, or but they're more independent in that they do their own thing. Like they're creating things within themselves. They're not like codependent. I mean, relationships, one example. I don't want to write a romance novel anymore. I wrote one once. It was like, that was a different me. That was like when I was younger. That was just a different. And the only reason I was writing that, I'm going to be honest with you, is because I read a lot of romance fiction. And I think we live in a society where that's still like a genre, a trope, except it's kind of changing a little bit. Like you're seeing more movies, more fiction with just people who live their lives and they don't have to be in a relationship. That's a big thing. That is a big thing. You just live your life and you don't have to be in a relationship. And I think that is unorthodox to some degree. And I'm not saying that people can't ever meet someone, but I do think like the most consummate like indication of being like a very independent person is you would be willing and ready to be single for the rest of your life, and you can do it. And I always kind of knew that about myself. I'm like, I'm a single type in all senses. Like I just am not somebody that relies on other people. But like I said, even people in relationships that are very like, they just have things that they want to do. Like they don't look to a group of people to do it. They don't want to be part of an organization. I think it's almost more of an introverted I'm not saying extroverts can't do this, but I think extroverted people, I think they need like to be part of a group more. Like extroverted people need that stimulation. They feel like they need to be part of a group. But I think introverted people, they want to create something. It's not that I don't like, I love having this channel because it's fun. Like I can kind of like share my thoughts and opinions about things. But I think honestly, as a more introverted person, I don't need, nor do I want to have to be part of a group. I just want to do something more independent, you know? So that's why I don't think you can ever rely on anybody. Like happiness, contentment, like, so there's nothing wrong. Like some people do want to be more reliant on other people. I just think if you're more introverted, you don't want to rely on anybody. But there are people in the world that, you know, that you can kind of coalesce with, that you can have partnerships with to some degree. But at the end of the day, it's mostly you and yourself. And even people that are like relationship people, they're just very independent. They're doing their own thing. They find stimulation in their hobbies, their activities. Like it's all about just finding stimulation from within yourself, like things that you can do. Like it's interesting. So I guess that's one explanation, because I talked with Aya about like how I didn't want to write a novel anymore because I wrote the novel, and after I wrote it, I thought, well, the premise of this novel doesn't really even appeal to anyone because it was just something, it was a creative exercise. I think the reason I wrote the novel was because I thought it would be fun to be a published author. I think I just liked the idea of it, but putting it into action wasn't that appealing. It just wasn't that appealing. And at the end of the day, like, yeah, maybe I would like to meet somebody one day. Like, I have friends, but I do believe, this is what I believe. I just think the more independent you are, like, you want to meet someone who mirrors your independence, who values your balance, and who gets you creatively, and somebody who's just very, like, consistent, strong cookie that would go up to bat every day all the way, like in supporting your independence. And I don't know. I haven't met someone like that. And I'm like, maybe there's people like that out there, but I don't know. I just haven't met a person like that who values my independence and who cheers me on and who is just like really balanced and consistent within themselves. Like, is there a person like that out there? Maybe there is. I don't know. I just haven't found that yet. And I don't know. I don't really feel like I need it. Like like things that I need. Like a lot of people like I have good friendships. Like I just don't need, like, I think you can get that feeling that a lot of people look for in relationships and friendships, with balance, with people who are independent, who are just very self-sufficient, that mirror you, you know. Some people just need, like, we do live in a culture where a lot of people are into being in a relationship and having children and having a large family. That's really important to them. Like they need that. But a lot of us are single and we choose to be single. And I think I'm one of those people. Like I am solo in so many different areas in my life. And it's kind of effing amazing to be a single person, to be a solo person, to know that even like people that you see that are in relationships, they're just so, like, they get their gratification and their stimulation from their hobbies, from their activities. This is a very introverted perspective. I don't think extroverts get this, because extroverted people, they need more communion with others. Introverted people, that's part of another reason that I just don't, I like to like talk with people and mirror thoughts, but I'm not the kind of person that necessarily wants to like have people as a sounding board. I kind of just want to find people that are creative types who like have more existential thoughts. I don't know. I'm like, are there people like that out there? I know that there's some people, but I'm kind of like looking for that person. I'm like someone who's introverted, someone who's balanced, someone who finds creativity within themselves, someone who looks for that in me. So I don't know. I think there might be someone like that out there for me, but I never found someone like that. I just, it would be amazing. But I don't know if they exist. Yeah. So to me, being single is fine. But that's one reason I didn't decide to finish writing that novel, because I was like, well, the whole premise of it really doesn't make any sense. It kind of helped me find myself. I really found myself in writing. So even though I consider myself more of a like an artist and a YouTuber, writing that fictional novel like a decade ago, it really helped me find myself. And I it also taught me that you do need to be fiercely like reliant on yourself. There's nobody on this planet that can provide happiness for you, tranquility for you, contentment, anything. Everything that you need comes from within yourself. Personally, I do believe in God. My beliefs are a little interesting though. I'm a little bit between Islam and Christianity, because sometimes I think Islam gets certain things, like Sufi Islam gets certain things better. Like I'm not a Muslim, but there's just certain things in Islam that they get more accurate, like with tolerance, like certain things about Christianity, the way that I think, I don't know, Protestant Christianity is, it's just too rigid. And I kind of like the whole idea of like the university, like it's not as, it's more inclusive. That's what I like about Islam a little bit more than Christianity. Although I don't belong to either religious group. I mean, I used to be nominally Christian, but I feel like I feel myself leaning towards Islam, because Islam has some very beautiful teachings. But I don't really belong to either. So I do believe in God. I'm not an atheist, but I don't have a problem with people who are atheists, because somebody asked me, like one day, they asked me something very strange on the channel, that they wanted me to talk about like some religious guy that was provocative, that went out on the streets and challenged people on their beliefs. And I'm like, I don't even care, because I just think that's provocative. Like, can't you be okay within yourself? Because if you're like a truly spiritual being, you don't need to go out on the streets and like antagonize people. That's one of the problems I have with Christianity, like the real evangelical form of Christianity, is like they're very antagonistic towards people. And I'm like, I don't like that. I'm not saying Muslims are perfect, but Sufi Islam is more just about like being and like finding balance. And like I love the nature and spirituality of God, not this whole like I need to be defined by what this one group says. Same with politics. I just, no, I come to this from a very introverted perspective. Everything I do is from an introverted perspective, and these are just my thoughts at the moment. My thoughts could be different in 11 years. I don't know, in 11 years how am I going to think about this, that, and the other thing. I do think in 11 years. I would like to keep growing on my creative journey. And one thing I know for sure 11 years from now is that I can only rely on myself, plus a few good friends I have who are very solid and very independent and very like consistent. Like you have to be consistent in all things in life for me to consider you like somebody worth knowing. It's hard to find consistent people like that. And some people are consistent, but we're kind of like the loners and we're like the extroverts and we're the ones that don't want to be part of the group. So if you don't want to be part of the group, you're part of our group. Aber to Weld and have a good night. I accept everybody. I don't feel like you have to be a certain like belong to a certain spiritual group or things. Like I feel like if you have your own beliefs, they're for you and you don't need to project them on others. Does that make any sense? Good night.